Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you might be in the world. It is us again, and the week has not disappointed. But let's kick off. Let's kick off with Tony Hallett. He's in. Tony, we will now just be us talking for a second. I'll unmute you in a second, but the video is plainly playing somewhere locally on one of your numerous machines there. Good day, Victor, Bo, and Osby Drone. That was automatic. So I'm going to jump. I'll jump back to Tony in a second, but I'm going to jump back to I'm going to jump to something which kind of blew my mind today. I'm going to put it in the comments. The UK CAA, in their wisdom, kindness, and as an act of generosity, have exempted control line flyers from some of the new regs coming in tomorrow. And we all is. Anyone else here? So it's gone nuts.
I'm here.
I'm here. Oh, you're here. All right. It's just all you weren't working. Louis froze. It's all horribly wrong. But did anyone else see this control line thing? But did anyone notice the wording which worried me the most? Which was they kept saying remote pilots for control line flyers. Now that's a worry. Now, come on, anyone else? What, am I going mad, or is this something we need to worry about?
No, you're attached to the plane. You're part of the plane. You've got wires, physical connection. You're not a remote pilot. You're actually just standing a long way away.
Well, no, not all that far away. About I can't remember how long.
No,
about 30
now, the new thing in the UK is flying with 4-mile long control lines, and it gives you so much more freedom.
Come on, guys. It's a physical connection like the radio is. Just remember your physics 101. Everything is energy, so the wires are energy. That manifests in a different way.
Everything is energy. We all are one, etc., etc.
Come on, guys. That's physics 101. As a civil aviation authority, the right to teach physics 101 to all people. Come on, we should know better.
Maybe, but and also notice the weight increase there. Or not weight increase, but a weight parameter, which I don't think's ever, because I'm pretty sure you get pretty big control line models. They used to do great big, like huge things. I seem to recall from my youth, but 7 kilos is the mass.
Yes, 7 kilos. But I noticed something quite interesting here. This actually would also allow tethered drones, because as long as you're limited to a hemisphere restricted by the length of the lines, you can fly tethered drones.
It's exactly, yes. They've put in place a permission for control line tethered drone. Yeah,
but look, I've been working with Thunder Tiger because they have an helicopter that weighs around 30 kilos, and one of the models has a tether, so it can stay parked in the air for hours and hours, working as a remote GSM antenna or something else. So it might fall on this category, except for the weight. It's 30 kilos. So there are use cases for tethered drones. The crazy contraption of the guys that are doing the window cleaning drone, which also has a hose going up 100 meters in the air. I don't know how. You really need a very powerful pump to get water that high, but that's another issue. So there are use cases for tethered drones.
Yeah.
I believe the authorities, the UK authorities, are quite distracted with all these Brexit things, so they're not paying much attention to what they really want with the regulations.
Yeah, maybe that's the point. Craig Michael Grice says so. F-16 pilots are remote pilots as well because they fly by wire. That's very true. And Airbus drivers. I can't unmute Tony. I've muted Tony and I can't unmute him. So I'm very sorry, Tony. If you can find,
he's unmuted now.
You're there. He's unmuted. There you are. You're back with us now. So let's jump. We'll come back to the control line thing. Let's jump to Tony's story. Tony. tell us what's got you hot under the collar recently.
Well, thanks for having me join this very dignified group here for the evening. We are based near Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We're a drone service company. We do predominantly we work with public safety agencies and the private sector on field activities as well as training, education, and consulting. In late January, we got called by a defense attorney, which was very unusual for us. And he asked if we were able to interpret flight records from a DJI Mavic. And we said, sure, we could do that. What was the deal? And here he had a client who had been accused of using that drone to harass dogs at a canine kennel, and a family that owned the kennel. And the reports that he originally gave us had like 15 criminal charges, and we're like, where did that come from? I don't even know how you can have that many charges of misdemeanors and felonies. And so we said, well, okay, we'll take a look. We'll get into it. And what we found since and what we've been involved with has been alarming. And the reason why it alarms us is because it's really a case about a prosecution of a recreational droner based on flight paths that the authorities have been able to recover from the drone, and it had no regard for the altitude of the flights, the speed, and what the other flights were that this guy was doing. They just a lot of charges really emerged from only one sighting, and so we think that is kind of a threat, I think, to the status quo. And just every time we get kind of settled that here in America that the FAA's got all the regulations out that we need and we're able to move ahead, so something like this happens, and it can provide a setback, because if it's the case that authorities are going to file charges against somebody flying a drone who's not breaking any of the FAA regulations, but just flying as a recreational user, and is charged based on flight records that they extract from the drone, I think we've got some things to worry about there. So I'd like to share the details with everybody, if that's okay, if we have.
Yeah, absolutely. But let me just understand, though. It's not
Sure.
the FAA that's coming after him. It's a
Correct.
local authority.
Right.
And I guess I have to ask a question. Was the chap maliciously flying over? I mean, was he out to get these people, this kennels, wherever it was?
No, and we needed to really look at that before we agreed to get involved, because we tend to work very closely with police departments. I'm an ex-cop. I mean, that's what we do. But at the same time, it's the work that we do for them is sometimes a journey for the truth, and you don't know where that's going to go. So we said, okay, we'll take a look. And when we did, we found that this guy had multiple flights, 37 flights, only 7 or 9 of which were affected by these charges, and the rest were elsewhere in the neighborhood and other places. The guy never took any photographs or videos in the neighborhood, and his flight paths were very much in line with what a recreational droner would do. You could see where he'd go up in the air, and he'd try to figure out how he'd stop before he would turn the drone, and he'd stop before he'd elevate, and so forth. And he explored different parts of the neighborhood. I mean, there was nothing suspicious in the flight paths, nothing. And when we looked, we took it down to the detail, because you can run those things down and look at it every 0.4 seconds. It writes data to the SD card that you can't really access. I mean, it's encrypted, and so we can pull that out and look at it and see what the speed was, the elevation was, every 0.4 seconds. And so it's not the case that the guy could do some things and then sneak down and look inside a window and go back up again. There's just no time for it. And the guy never flew down to lower. Well, for the most part, he was just zipping around the neighborhood. And a guy, I should mention, he's 68 years old. He's retired. He got a drone in July. This occurred in 2017. This has been ongoing for a while. Yeah, there was nothing in there that indicated he was anything other than a guy who got a drone and was flying around the neighborhood and doing his best to stay within the FAA regulations for recreational users.
How could they prove that he was behind the controls from a log file? Well,
yeah, it's a mystery how they're going to prove much of anything in this case. And well, let me run through it here, and it'll give you an idea of the uniqueness of this case and the frustrations of this case. So we're talking about a time period that really is August 3rd of 2017 through October 20th, roughly, of 2017. In that time period, he had, like I said, about 37 flights, 9 of which were involved with this, the property of the complainant. This guy's property and the complainant, their property abuts each other, but there's about 800 feet of forest in between the two. So you have to fly in the woods and go over top, and then you hit the residence of the complainant, and then the kennels is a bit beyond that. So he would fly in patterns in different directions, and it would include flying over that. So on October 10th, now nothing happened with this until October 10th of 2017. The complainant and they train in part police dogs at this kennel, and there was a policeman there, and he noticed the drone flying up overhead, and he pointed that out to the complainant, to the owner, who then followed it back over to the defendant's house, and he landed in this driveway, and the guy went over and said, "Look, I don't want you flying that drone over our property. We have things going on there that make people nervous if there's a drone flying over top." And the guy said, "Okay." And at that point, he never flew over that property again from that point forward. So he just, he went about his business. He flew once again on like October 18th, but it wasn't anywhere near those properties. And that was it as far as he was concerned. On October 22nd, which was a Sunday, the complainant called the local police department, who came out, and he said, "Hey, there's this guy across the way here, and he's been flying this drone, and he was flying it around and scaring the dogs today, and he was looking in our window, in our living room window, and he was going on and on." Well, the police took all this information down, and they never talked to the defendant. They just took this information from the guy and said, "Okay, we're going to talk to the district attorney tomorrow." So the next day, they went in and talked to the district attorney, apparently. And then they showed up in early November with 7 criminal charges and a search warrant to take the drone and his cell phone, which they did. And the 7 criminal charges included one for October 8th, saying that on Sunday, October 8th, he was flying and that he was witnessed by a police officer from Wisconsin. And October 22nd, when the day that the complainant called the police, said that he was flying around those days, and so forth. So they seized the drone and they turned it over to the FAA. They got the FAA investigation team, got them involved, and had them look at it. And the FAA did their forensics. They extracted the data. They provided all of us. We have all their records too. And they came back and said, "Okay, here's all the data." And they explained to him, this is how it works. The DJIs record sequentially every flight that you take, and they record all that data about that flight. And you can't get in and erase it. It's on an SD card that's glued to the board in the back. You can't get in. You take that apart, you won't be able to put it back together again. So you can get those records. You can pull them out, but you can't alter them. You can't change them. You can't delete any of them, and so forth. So when it came back, it showed that the guy didn't do any flights on October 8th. He didn't have any flights on the 22nd when he filed the complaint. The only flight that he had near that property was on the 10th, and that's when the guy saw it and said, "Don't do that anymore." So they figured, well, they're going to drop the charges because he wasn't flying those days, and if he was, it would have been recorded. There's no way to take that out. And the analysis was of the FAA's data. The FAA extracted the data. It wasn't like we did it or anybody else. That's when they extracted it. So they thought, well, that would probably be the end of it at that point, because you had everything was based in October, limited to October. So instead of any charges being dropped, they came back and charged them with 8 more counts, including felonies. And what they did is they looked at the flight paths that were recorded by the DJI in August and September. And they noticed 7 dates that, in addition to flying elsewhere in the neighborhood, the flight path went over the properties of this kennel and this residence. They didn't analyze it down to the detail that we did. They didn't look at the height. They didn't look at the speed. They didn't look at anything. The very fact that he flew over that property is what they based 8 more charges on. Now, at this point, we have 15 charges against this guy based on 7 flights in August and September, 1 flight in October that did occur, and 2 flights that were alleged that never occurred in October. And throughout this whole thing, the only time that anything has been witnessed was on the 10th. October 10th is when the police officer and the complainant saw the drone and he followed it back to the driveway. That was the only time that anybody's witnessed any flight and anything that this guy did, despite the fact that he's got 15 charges, including felony charges, for a 3-month time period.
Just
now, stop for a second. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so we've got a situation here where there's this kennel and they have dogs which they train up for the police. So obviously they're getting some, it would seem, preferential treatment in this situation. He said, I've got an issue with this drone owner, and so the drone owner is now being targeted. Now, I know it's also, I don't think it's something you mentioned there, but I know Gary giving us a bit of a heads up with this. So I'm meant to understand that basically some of the dogs were injured, one's bitten another, and they've said that's because of the drone, and that's something they're trying to pin on him.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Oh, sorry. Well, has it been the case that this guy that has the kennel has said that the drone has startled the dogs and caused one dog to bite another, or something to that effect? Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and the way that the charges have read, it's a combination of causing the dogs to react a certain way and to act out, and then there were several harassment charges filed saying that he's harassed people by flying and following people around with the drone. And for example, that one on Sunday, October 8th, I think it was the Sunday, that they said, I mean, this guy was about 1,600 feet away from the place. And what they alleged was that he was flying around a property at 11 o'clock, 10:30, 11 o'clock at night in the dark over those woods, another 1,200 feet from the woods to a compound of multiple buildings, dropping the drone down between those buildings and following somebody around, all while using an iPhone on his Mavic controller to do that navigation. That would take an incredibly skilled person to fly something like that. Just even if they did have anything recorded that day, but there was nothing recorded that day.
Just a small question. I believe that we have been mentioning the drone. Yes. I believe it could be the case of a drone, and that would make not a single drone operating at the same location, but multiple drones operating at the single location. And as you've mentioned, I believe Mavic, it's a common household item, so people can go to anywhere and pick up a Mavic. And as there is no outside means of identification between two Mavics, or even a Mavic and something else, could be the case of having more than one drone flying in that area. Could the DJI being summoned to provide, if there are other drones operating at that area, provide that data?
Well, here's the thing, and a second drone, the theory has been advanced from a few places, but not from the local police department. Now this is a rural area where this transpired, and the local police department had I think 2 full-time people and 4 part-time officers on it. When they took the information on the 22nd from the complainant, they didn't interview the defendant. They didn't conduct interviews with other people. And when they had that instance where they charged him with flying around with that Wisconsin officer following her around, the police department didn't even talk to her. They charged her, but they didn't talk to her. So we're very curious as to the extent of the investigation, and we put forth that question to them. But the entire police department, a couple weeks ago, the entire police department was suspended by their township for investigation into multiple wrongdoing affairs. And so there is no police department right now that charged them. They're suspended en masse until June 1st, and they have the Pennsylvania State Police covering the community for right now. But, so while we think that there was not a very thorough investigation, not very good police work, their own township apparently has some problems with their ability to conduct investigations. And again, as I said before, we tend to work with police departments a lot. That's our and we didn't like the idea of not of working for a defense attorney, but in this case, this was a really bad investigation, and we feel that this guy has been charged, and he shouldn't be charged. And another note too, the district attorney that's doing the prosecution, the district attorney was just found guilty of corruption a couple of months ago himself, and so it's not what you'd call a real strong community as far as integrity goes.
So it's more a problem. It's a drone, but could be something else. Could be a plow, could be something else. And due to all those constraints you mentioned, the drone is just a poor excuse for the losses of the kennel guys.
Well, yeah, jump in with a few thoughts. Sorry, go on, Gary. You go first.
Well, all I'm thinking of now, and no offence is meant here, Tony. All I'm imagining is that you're someplace where Boss Hogg is there, and whatever his deputy was called, and there's cars jumping over bridges and ramps, and young ladies in very short shorts. You're an ex-copper, Tony. Surely you can't just say somebody is. Surely nowhere in the world, perhaps many places in the world, somebody can say that person did that and charge them for it with absolutely no proof.
Yeah, it's very puzzling on a lot of fronts for us. The community isn't the one that we live in. It's north of us, about an hour and a half away, and it's fairly rural. And to give you an idea of what the challenges are of bringing up the points that you just did, is that we had a hearing, an evidentiary hearing last week, and we were going to show the flight paths and show our data and show how that all works. They said that they could set up technology for us, and when we got there, they were unable. They didn't have internet access in the courtroom. they brought up some TV set that wouldn't work with anything, and they messed around for half an hour with it and said, well, it can't be brought up. So we can't even show the evidence because this is a courthouse that cannot provide the technology to show the evidence that I just have been talking about. So when you say, you know, boss hog and so forth, it's I wouldn't say that it's widespread in that community or it's entirely like that, but certainly the criminal justice system within that county does not seem to be really up to snuff as far as the technology standards and allowing us to really talk about charges that are allegations that have no eyewitnesses and no basis to them.
So basically, they picked up the book and threw the book at the poor guy that was flying the drone, and hope that something sticks. That's
yeah,
it,
I
right?
mean, yeah. The charges. There's even 2 eco-terrorism charges. Eco-terrorism is a crime that went on the books in Pennsylvania, in I believe 2005 or 6. And as far as we can tell, it's never been. Nobody's ever been charged with it. They've charged him with 2 counts of eco-terrorism, and it is. It's a case of throwing spaghetti on a wall and trying to see what sticks. And it's just absolutely horrendous what they're doing. This guy is retired. He had a small barbecue business on his side. He's had to use his life savings to defend himself from this absurdity. And there's no end in sight. You know, now we have to go get an animal behaviorist and cover the cost of that. We have to run tests to be able to show people, if we could find the technology to actually show it in the courtroom, we have to be able to show people, here's what your screen looks like if you're flying at 380 feet and using an iPhone to navigate your Mavic with all the controls on that screen. Here's what you see. I mean, it's not like you've got a widescreen vision of somebody's bedroom window here. It's like you can barely, see the horizon out of this stuff.
Well, Rybat's making some comment in the comments saying former police have a moral and ethical responsibility to demonstrate that suspect is innocent with as much effort as they're guilty, and police can be countercharged with official oppression. And that's I'm going to ask. So this gentleman is getting a really hard time because of this, and it doesn't. From what you've said, it doesn't seem right at all. It doesn't. I can't see how it can go forward. What redress will he have against them when this all turns around, and how will he get his life savings back?
Can I just jump in? Just a quick thought before that's answered, because there's a few things here. First, this isn't the first time where there's been an issue with a drone being accused of animals reacting. I think there was a case in the UK with a police horse, and I think then it was a 250, and saying the two things are linked. Now, in fairness, if you're flying a drone, unless you are really genuinely buzzing an animal and being stupid, you're not. Most people out there aren't trying to cause any issues. I think one thing should be considered. Is there any intent there? And often that gets lost. And obviously, as has been mentioned here, it sounds like it was at altitudes and that where it simply couldn't have been the case anyway. But it does concern me. But there's kind of miss, because if you go back to even like when the railway came out, I think even with the car and saying, it would startle animals and they would die as it went past and all this from it. And we're getting a bit of that with drones. And actually, the way animals behave, there isn't a set behavior. I heard it said at the time, and I certainly saw there was actually a woman who posted online about a horse saying they'd seen a drone round once, and then suddenly the horse had got injured at some later date, and they put 2 and 2 together and got 5 and said it must be the drone. But it's they don't all react the same. I've been on a what do you call it? Stables where they wanted him actually the drone to film the horses. They said, you sure? And I go, yeah, fine. And the horses weren't in the least bit bothered because it's in the air. They don't see it as a predator. They weren't bothered. Doesn't mean that all horses are bothered. There might be some that are. And again, I think it would be the same with dogs. But my first question would be, is we know when it was first seen at the kennels and they've said to him, please don't come back. Now, presumably, the dogs didn't go mental then and bite each other. Otherwise, there would have been charges immediately. So surely you have the defence straight away of, well, you've got an incident there proven with the drone there, and the dogs haven't attacked each other. So the idea that you could say a drone being there will always result in a problem, I think you could disprove. I do think in this case, it would be worth getting a video of the guy and explaining what's gone on and put a Kickstarter up. I know there's plenty, and I'm sure Bruce would put it on his channel and so on, of saying, let's contribute. I don't know if you call it a Kickstarter or what. It wouldn't be without, a fundraiser thing where people from the, all the drone community can come together, chip in a bit of money to his legal fees. I think that'd be really worth doing. But there'll be quite a bit of evidence there we could use. I mean, the very fact you've said that there are logs that prove that, basically there's no logs on certain dates. Well, to me, that's proof positive he wasn't doing the flights. But also you could use the phone records from the phone company, because if he's using the app on his mobile, they'll have GPS location. Even when you don't have that, the cell sites, when you make a call or when it registers in, the mobile networks recall the cell site you're on, so you can use that for triangulation, or at least putting you in a particular place. I think there's quite a bit of evidence that could be utilised there to actually prove his innocence. So that was my thoughts. I'll let you continue.
Well, just to react to that a little bit, the readings that we're able to take off of that, as I said, every 0.4 seconds. One of the elements of that is how many satellites we're hitting with that, and it's always 12 to 16 satellites as far as the GPS location. So we have good confidence with that. As far as the flyovers, I can tell you that of the 7 that were done in that time period they mentioned, the lowest was at 145 feet AGL. The highest was at 390. Flight times over those properties ranged from 13 seconds to 108 seconds. The longest it was over any of it was 108 seconds, and it's a reach to say that that drone would have been affecting these dogs that way on a continual basis when there was only 9 flights over a 3-month period that lasted a total of about 11 minutes of flight time over those 3 months. The owner said, well, that they've had problems with things getting the dogs worked up at night, and they thought it was coyotes, and they got motion activated cameras, and they put around the place to look for coyotes at night. Well, first off, he had no night flights. The latest he ever flew that was 6 o'clock at night. And as far as the cameras, they said, well, in the newspaper, they told the newspaper that one of the cameras got knocked over by one of the trainers inadvertently, and it caught the drone flying around on the camera. And we've asked repeatedly for that, and the district attorney doesn't know what we're talking about. So there's a lot of innuendo and misstatements that are floating around in this case. And to go back, Gary, to your question as far as recourse and recovery, I think we'll see what kind of recourse. I mean, typically in these kind of situations, people wait to see what the outcome of a criminal trial is, and that includes appeal. So I don't know that anybody's going to get into civil action. I think that what the owner was trying to do was put all this blame on this guy so that he could have some vet bills paid for whatever he said. But it's going to be curious. We're curious to see what's common as far as injuries at that place over a period of time, and what specifically is different about this time period that could have been caused by the dogs. Now, I tell you, I think it's an important issue, especially in law enforcement, for us to understand what effect a drone has on dogs, especially canines. We trained with one of our board members is a dog trainer, really high-end dogs, and we've trained with him. We've taken the drone out and and that dog doesn't even pay attention. I mean, it doesn't even look at the drone. It pays attention to the handler. Now, if the handler wasn't around, I don't know what they do. I think it is important, though, to know what kind of impact it might have on dogs. And testing needs to be done for that. But unfortunately, the testing is going to be done, at the expense of our client, because he's trying to keep himself from, out of jail and felony charges. So, if people have research out there, we sure want to find it. We've been trying to locate existing stuff. And we'll keep that up. But I think, it's certainly one of the issues that we have to look at.
Well, I can, if you've watched this channel before, I'll tell the other guys to make a cup of coffee and get bored now. It's time to pull up a sandbag. I've got a story for I used to fly hot air balloons in the UK, and this is to insurance fraud claims. And we fly from central London towards Lippets Hill, which is where the UK police have a big base. And my boss had never been up there, 2 balloons. And I said to him on the wireless, I said, oh, look down there, there's yon coppers down at Lippets Hill. And he thought he'd have a go and have a look down. So down he flew, he went down there. And afterwards, we had an irate, we had a phone call from our insurers because there was a little pond just to the south of Lippets Hill. And on that little pond was some of the world's most expensive ducks. And the guy says, oh, you just killed £45,000 worth of duck eggs. And the worst thing was we didn't even get an omelette out of it. So that was, oh God. And at that point, that was the largest ever single animal claim. And it was £75,000 worth in UK ballooning history. Roll on another 12 months and we have an ex-police inspector come and crew on the balloons for us and work for us. Down the pub, we were recounting the tale of the man from Lippets Hill with the world's most expensive duck eggs. And he says, oh, really? That's very interesting, because he's had 3 lots from the police helicopter. And then the investigation ensued, and the guy was defrauding was making insurance claims left, right, and center. Trucks, helicopters, balloons, anything you like. So it may not, your idea that that the kennel owner might want some vet bills paid might not be too far from the truth. But surely I can't get over. So we can park that. That's an accusation that I can't make, obviously. But let's park that. I can't get past the police. You can't charge someone without evidence anywhere, surely. And Bruce is very quiet on this, which is a worry.
Yeah, the attorney that we're working for has made his case. I mean, we did the best we could last week with no technology, but he still got the motions. And to have a crime, you have to have 2 things. When you have to have a crime, and the other is you have to have intent. And they're when you look at the charges and break down the charges, they don't apply. There's no crime. There's no crime that's been committed by this guy. And there certainly was no intent to do anything other than fly around the neighborhood. And there's additional tests, like, for example, a lot of these charges are harassment charges, but each one names a different person who had been harassed. The police officer from Wisconsin, the guy's wife. But harassment requires a pattern of multiple contacts, right? To harass somebody, you have to be doing it more than one time. And none of those charges spell out anything about multiple occasions. So again, how can you have a crime of harassment when there's only a single incident that's stated and that incident never occurred? So there's no crime, there's no intent here. There is just a very spirited attempt to blame a guy in a drone on a lot of woes that really escalated. There were a couple of people from the neighborhood that also kicked in, like their comments and their charges about this. And again, they were apparently, one of them said that they know that they had the right date because that's the date that the complainant told them that he saw one too. So it's kind of a few people falling in line, you know, and as a police officer, you see that a lot. You know, it's like if one person stands up and says that guy did it, everybody tends to jump on if they've got a complaint. So, you know, one woman said, well, it keeps flying over her house at night and she's got horses coming. Wait, it never flew over her house at night. It was there 3 times over the entire 3-month period over near her property for a period of just a few seconds as he flew over top of it. And she never could say what dates they were. Nobody saw this. You know, how often do people see a drone 400 feet up in the air and make a complaint? They don't. They all find out about it when they looked at this at the flight paths, and then at that point they decide, oh yeah, we saw a drone, it did this and that. So it's frustrating from that standpoint, and that's what alarms me is that if this case goes forward, if by chance this guy gets convicted, then we've got case law, and we've got 40,000 municipalities in the United States, and every one of them is going to be bringing up and saying, we're gonna have you arrested if you fly over our house with a drone, even though there's nothing in the FAA law, nothing. We're going to arrest you for this with a harassment charge or an eco-terrorism charge, and you won't even see it coming. Like, how do you run a business if you've got that kind of environment that you might fly a drone and just inadvertently be someplace to cause the police and they get you arrested? So I think it's a very serious issue.
And all the charges, they studiously avoided having anything that would get the FAA to tell them, oh, you can't do that, you can't say that. I'm not putting this very well, because as far as I can tell, you don't have. I mean, you could also ground all general aviation and all commercial flights flying in that area by this sort of logic.
Yeah, well, the FAA is not taking any kind of action. I don't know what action they would take. They did the report. They extracted the data. They said, here's the data. And moved on. You know, the FAA's got authority in the national airspace system, and municipalities and states are really pushing that issue a lot in different locations. And you know, it's not necessarily all bad. I mean, you do want to kind of control this, but at the same time, municipalities are approaching this as a zoning issue. Like, well, you can't fly here, you can't fly there, and over here. Like, how could you possibly show that to people? Like, how can you get that information as to where you can fly and where you can't fly in any given municipality? How can that easily be put out there, especially because nobody but the FAA is allowed to really say that's restricted airspace, right? So the FAA did their job in that they integrated drones into the national airspace system. But what they didn't do, and what they're not responsible for, is integrating drones into communities and into workplaces. And that's what we're starting to see now, is that the integration into a neighborhood where you have people who have maybe seen newspaper articles about the drone requirements in the FAA, but they have no understanding of it. They only understand it when a drone is suddenly up over their house and it's making them nervous. And they don't understand it. And so now we're going to deal with how do we integrate this into neighborhoods? And if we thought integration into the national airspace system was tough, wait to see what we're going to be going through, like issues like this for integrating into neighborhoods.
One thing I should have done at the top of this was warn you, Tony. We have only one rule here, and is that common sense isn't allowed. And I think you just hit the common sense button there. Yeah, no, that's You're bob on right. Yes, integration is one thing, and the neighborhood another. That's very, very right. I should be thinking about that. Louis chipping in.
The issue here is when is FAA committed to say that the drone is flying on their regulated airspace or unregulated airspace class G, and if it was operating within the airspace that is committed to FAA, then municipalities have nothing to do with that. Right. The more they want to have it, they can't, because it's an airspace, and the authority over that airspace, regulated or unregulated class G, it belongs to the jurisdiction belongs to the FAA. Period. There's no issue over there. Now, if if in the US the FAA wants to give the municipalities the right to regulate until the 400 feet, that's another issue. But I don't think that they want that.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, we had one, there's one municipality here, I think in Massachusetts, that wanted to just ban drones outright. And so what they did is they said, well, you can't fly a drone any lower than 400 feet. And since the FAA says you can't fly it any higher than 400 feet, if that would have passed, then it would essentially say you can't fly here. And the FAA, I think, took them to court and beat them and said you've got no standing to come in and say where somebody could fly in the airspace like that, you know, other than if there's specific issues and so forth.
Yeah, if the guy that is on your case has flown below the height of the houses, that is a different issue. That is the owners or the municipality if it is public domain. If he has flown above the houses, the judge will have to be okay. Will have to be inclined to have inclined to have a decision. Otherwise, it's a clear-cut case.
One question I'll ask is: have you reached out to Brendan Schulman at all at DJI?
We have not. No, I haven't. I don't know that that's been attempted, but we have not. Because
they'll bring in some if they're interested, bring in some big guns. He's a good guy. He certainly has some strong words for it. But it's sort of instantly what's coming to my mind is if that municipality or police department has a Twitter account or Facebook page, it's time for the massed RC ranks to turn up and say, "Hello, what's going on with this then?"
Yeah, well, it would be nice because this guy was just, I mean, he's retired. I think he worked in the Air Force at across the state border in Youngstown, Ohio. But he wasn't a pilot. He just always liked flight, and that's how he got into droning. Now you know he's lived in this neighborhood forever. His family, you know, everybody grew up there. And now suddenly the newspapers vilify and make this guy out to be monstrous, saying, you know, he's terrorizing dogs with his drone. There was never any intent. There was never, none of these flights went anywhere near those dogs. They were overhead. And you know, the Mavic is probably one of the more quiet drones that we've used. You know, I think it's got some silencing technology in there. And that's not to say that dogs aren't going to hear it, but you can't stretch this to any point to say that this guy was terrorizing dogs. And if you read the charges and the way that they're worded, it's just horrendous what they're doing to a guy who's lived in that neighborhood, who's been a good neighbor. That facility has contracted with him in the past to cater some of their events because he has a little barbecue business on the side. Now, all of a sudden, everybody's looking and saying, "This guy, this 68-year-old guy, is just an awful person terrorizing animals." How can his family go walk around in a grocery store after what the newspapers reported about this guy, based on police reports, all of which came from one person? It didn't come from any other witness because they didn't interview other people. So, it's a horrendous thing, and so it's really nice if people from the drone community would tell this guy, you know what, that same thing could happen to me. What's going on here in this remote rural Pennsylvania community, this can happen to anybody, not just in this country, but anybody in the world. And in any of your countries, the same thing could happen if you get the right combination of people who are much more ignorant than they are interested in getting to the truth.
Yeah, well, the Osby Drones mentioned no charges for people that have shot drones out of the sky in the aviation regs, and Bruce, of course, lives in a country where they want it. They've got an app, or they may have an app So you can report your neighbour, and this nuttiness can continue. So what are we going to do? Plainly, this is just wrong. It's just wrong.
Yeah.
So how are we going to rattle a cage to help this chap?
You've nailed it already, really. You need to shine the light of publicity. That will sort this out every time. Until that's done, because I mean, none of us until today were even aware this was going on. So that obviously goes throughout the drone community throughout the world. But if you get a YouTube video, record this guy, get him speaking, putting his side of the story up, then put the Twitter account for the police department, the Facebook page, the local media there that's vilified him, and so on. And then the drone community, because obviously you as well, Gary, can put a video on here, get other people putting videos on about it, and then we can actively start fighting the inaccuracies and putting, both sides of the story out there. And then hopefully that will, I mean, it can certainly help if they want a fundraiser to help pay its legal fees. And it can certainly help with the publicity of fact of saying there's actually two sides to this story. I mean, it's very odd when it's coming from one person, because you do get neighbours that all the time that are in disputes, and you will get the story that's told that's very different to the truth. And police officers will be familiar with that. That's why normally you would get both sides of the story, and you would try to establish what the facts are. But I think this guy is being given all of the benefit of the doubt, and unfortunately, the drone news has been on the receiving end. But until there's publicity there, it's all just going to be behind closed doors in court, and obviously then it can go either way.
And I must say that the guy that has the dogs should get some better breeds, because I remember even last week I was flying with my neighbor's dogs, which is a Rhodesian Ridgeback and a Doberman, and the Doberman was asleep and could be moved from the drone, and it was lying in the grass. And the Rhodesian Ridgeback took fun of the drone because it was flying 2 meters from the dog, and gave up after 3 jumps that couldn't reach the drone, and gave up. So even the guy that has the dogs must have something to do. So it's a crazy prosecution. That it's lots of bad things compounded. Strange dogs that get disturbed by drones, allegedly. Strange accusations and unverified flights. It's a sum of negatives.
There's one risk going public, and that is that the public loves dogs. They're cute little furry, pets, and the public hates drones. So you could end up with taking it to the public arena and finding that the vast majority of people will side with the dog training people, because dogs are nice and drones are evil. And these young 68-year-olds with their drones are just bent on causing havoc and mayhem. We all know that. He was probably looking for an airliner to bring down. So you've really got to be careful of this public domain, taking into the public domain thing, because we do have this media bias. And the media, if they get a hold of this, they'll probably twist it and make it into another drone vilification story. They won't care about the facts. They'll just say a 68-year-old man was terrorizing dogs with his drone, and then the public come around and go, "Oh, this is terrible," and so the courts are pressured by the public opinion. So it's a double-edged sword. We have to be very careful with that sort of.
The situation is in now actually couldn't be any worse for starters, from what we're hearing. So I think with that one, I don't think there's anything to lose, but it doesn't have to be that we have necessarily the wider public on our side. Just from the fact, especially if you've got it international, if you've got a police force that know they haven't done the job properly and are just being biased to the complainants, and if they're thinking, we've got people in the UK, New Zealand, Australia, as well as America looking at this, it suddenly gets a lot more difficult to, basically be showing favoritism and be bending the rules.
But surely this police force, so it's in a town, but then they must answer to, it must go up as it goes up through the state to a higher level, or are they the law, and that's that?
Nah, that's that. Pennsylvania is kind of an unusual state, and then you have we have about 1,000 separate small police departments here, as well as a state police force. And it's the case that historically all our communities like to have their own little police force that they can control and manage and so forth. And so it's not at all an efficient policing system. But for the most part, I mean, I was on a small police department. Most of our clients that are police departments are smaller departments. They are very good departments, and they tend to have very good people. This department, I don't know what they're like otherwise. I mean, certainly they've done some things wrong to be all suspended at one time. One of the things that they did apparently is they were buying automatic weapons for themselves using the department letterheads, because you're not allowed to buy an automatic weapon as an individual. So they were using it, but police departments can. So they were buying it from the police department. They even had payroll deduction. And so, you know, it's not the kind of police departments that I'm used to working with. I've worked with very professional departments who all of them would either we've helped set them up and train them, or we respond to their communities. And all of those departments, if they would have any incident like this, they would call us right away and say, what should we do? How do we handle this? And this department that unfortunately doesn't subscribe to that. They seem to be a one interview department that will interview one guy and say, okay, let's go charge somebody.
Well, I don't know about the others, but I'm just like jaw dropping stuff. And if we can help, we will. There's no doubt. Well, you haven't named. What is the name of the police department?
The department it's South Pymatuning Police Department, South Pymatuning Township Police Department in Mercer County, Pennsylvania.
I didn't quite catch. You might have to spell out that name. I didn't quite catch
South,
that.
It's Pymatuning, Pymatuning Township.
So Papa Yankee Mike Alpha Tango Uniform Mike, and I lost it after that.
Pymatuning.
Okay, ING at the end. All right, I will go off and Mercer County. I will go off and have a look for that, Pennsylvania.
Well, I appreciate you allowing me time to bring this. And as we talked, you know, the whole issue of drones is for the first time in my lifetime something that we discuss as an international community. As we're trying to integrate this into our own countries, we find that we all have similar problems. You do in the UK, you do it in Australia, Canada. We're all having the same kind of growing pains, if you will. And so it's the first time I've ever seen a forum where we can talk about the common issues that affect us all and understand those issues. You know, most of what I hear about, you know, happening politically in Europe, I don't have a clue what people are talking about. But this I do. And I think that those of us in the drone community like to share this information because we know that we're all facing these common growing pains and problems, and how do we deal with that, and what can be done. And you know, should we get a drone? Should we go introduce ourselves to everybody in the neighborhood and let them touch it and feel it and see what it is before, so they're not scared of it before you fly it over their house? I don't know. I don't know what the protocol is going to wind up being. But the thing that doesn't help is when you have a horrible investigation like this, a lack of investigation, and a police department and a district attorney that just want to pile on charges on some lifelong resident who was not doing a thing wrong without them looking in and trying to get to the truth first before they file papers.
Okay, it's what's the next step? So it's all in limbo while they're all suspended, is it?
Well, I don't know. The department's supposed to be back up in June, but I don't know if it's going to be the same people. I hear they're looking for a new police chief and so forth. So I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen with that. I'm curious as to how anybody comes and testifies if they're no longer a police department. You know, we'll see how that goes. But one way or the other, I mean, the first thing that happens is the criminal trial has to play out and see where it goes. And that's always a roll of the day, especially when you're in a community that can't set up a television system for us to show evidence. And so that's frightening. And so I think that the leadership in the drone community, and AUVSI leadership is involved. I've briefed them. AMA leadership, I briefed them. Everybody's following this issue because they know that hey, it could go south and sideways and really take a strange turn. And so, you know, the first thing we got to do is see how that goes. And then after the outcome of that, you know, I don't see how this guy gets convicted at all. But you never know what happens. You know, if he's exonerated, then I think he has to look and see what kind of damage they've done to his life with this absurdity. And I think that he has recourse. And I think that that's going to prove to be quite a lesson for anybody else that wants to get into this game of let's pow on the old guy that flies a drone, right? And so, you know, but we'll just have to wait and see. I mean, in the meantime, it's like, can we keep this guy going in court when he's going through his life savings, just trying to defend himself from this absurdity? So we'll see. It's, you know, it's going to be another year playing out probably. Within the trial date is in May. They set the trial date on this guy's birthday, which is interesting. And so, just, you know, it's I think by then I think it's going to have more traction as a national story. And I think that as we're not at all afraid of the facts coming out on this. I've done the diagnostics on myself. I mean, I've looked at this evidence myself personally for hours and hours. This guy did not do what they're saying he did. And even though court is like I say, it's a roll of the dice. As a former police officer, I got to say that usually justice works out okay for people, especially if they're innocent. They might lose all their money, they might lose all their friends, but they don't go to jail. So I'm hoping that that's what happens here.
It's madness. It's madness. It's madness. It's interesting. Asked by drones in the comments, and the shooting incidents that have happened where people have shot down drones and a few other things. It seems like aviation authorities are dodging around the best they can to not have the drone actually named an aircraft, even though they want it to be named an aircraft, because that's how they make their regulations work. But when it comes to prosecuting anything where naming it an aircraft means it's named an aircraft, they don't do it. And you sort of think, well, what would happen if this was a light aircraft and the FAA were involved over there? And well, no, I'm just continuing this story, I suppose. There's just so many angles. There's so many angles. Well, thank you very much for telling us about it, Tony. I'm sorry that, well, thank goodness you're there and involved with it. That attorney lucked in and picked on a guy who would try and get to the heart of it. So thank goodness for that. And if anything we can do to help, we will. I know Bruce will have his thinking cap on and he'll have some fabulous ideas because he's like that. But I see we've gone over the hour. So, gentlemen, did anyone else see anything else, or do we want to whinge about anything else before we go?
Yes. I see the first death attributed to recreational multi-rotor drone use has occurred in the USA.
Oh dear, that's happened while we've been on air, has it?
No, that was the guy that electrocuted himself trying to get his drone out of trouble.
Oh, that guy. Yeah, okay.
Well, I'm sure someone will bring that up. Yes, these drones have killed. And in India, someone was badly burnt when, this made me laugh, the headline, it was either a drone or a firework. They don't know which. I mean, if you can't tell the difference, you shouldn't be writing newspaper stories. I'm sorry.
Shame, man. Yeah. Yes, a terrible way to lose a life, but I don't think it's the first. I do believe someone went through a icy lake somewhere. I think also in North America last year or the year before, doing exactly the same, trying to recover his downed airframe.
And I believe Bruce missed the most important event of the week, that on his home country, a plane was caught on camera damaging a poor little bird on that aviation festival.
On Avalon, yes, in his true home country, yes, the C-17.
C-17.
Come on, Bruce, you haven't ranted about that because it was a cruelty to the birds. Oh,
well, I can't talk. I clear the airfield of birds all the time.
There we go.
Now we see you're lucky because those seagulls are very polite, because if you come here we have seagulls that on their nesting periods, they attack drones, even big drones. And it is nice to see.
It's a matter of behavioral learning, because we used to have magpies. Magpies are notorious for attacking people, and during the nesting season, they'll swoop down, attack kids on bikes and everything. We used to have trouble with magpies until I spent an entire spring chasing them with RC models. And now the magpies, we're the only place in New Zealand where the magpies do not attack models. In fact, we've seen magpies land at one end of the flying area and walk along the fence line for 200 meters and then take off again rather than fly through. It is I should film it, because they do it every year now. They just will not fly around us because I just scared the snot out of them.
It's called a
now we have Mr. Bruce, the animal psychologist, is doing some animal psychology and conditional behavior.
Yeah, with the thing before, you notice those dogs are locked up in cages. I would have thought that was far more stressful for a dog to be locked up in a cage than to be overflown at 398 feet by a drone.
Yeah.
I've got another sandbag story for you for animal behavior. There was a terrible incident where a child was pulled from a tent by a hyena, and the child was no longer a child anymore after that. And the defense were arguing on one side, whichever side was arguing that it could open. There was, it was murder, but they could open the tent, and that's how it got in. The tent was closed. They opened the tent. I happen to know the world hyena expert that was called to say that hyenas don't have opposable thumbs. It was. This animal behavior stuff it goes crazy. Sorry, I've ranted on the side, and I wanted to say to Ian something. I wanted to say to Ian what's his thoughts. And I don't know if any of you other guys saw it, but the holiday extras things. If you've got friends like that, and this actually speaks a little bit to Tony's issue. In the UK, Tony, you won't have seen it. There's somebody sort of stood up and said, unless you're super trained and you're skilled as skill can be, you should never fly a drone. And we holiday extras are the skilliest, skilledy people in the world.
Yes.
He shot at the whole, he had a pop at everybody else. We don't, as an industry, we don't stand together worldwide, and that's what we need to do.
His commercial operating authority had expired. He wasn't a licensed drone operator anymore, according to one of the posts on the video.
Right.
Yeah, that's right. So we made this big, they made a survey, and I don't know. What was your thoughts on that, Ian?
Well, it's the thing that used to happen many years ago, and it did wind me up, because you don't see it in the motor industry, or I've never seen it. You don't see, a Twitter account from a local dealership going, look at that drunk driver crashing his car, look at that bank robbery being done with that particular model of car, or whatever else it is, all the negative stuff you could come up with. Yeah, we certainly had commercial operators that were even going to the newspaper and giving them scare stories just so they can go, I'm such and such and limited, and I'm in this city, and I fly drones, and I've got my PSC on, so I'm safe, but everyone else is dangerous. And that really did wind me up, because that's unfair, because people aren't even coming away with thinking, well, if you've taken a training course to say, all the message they get is they're unsafe, because you've just said they're unsafe. You can't say they're unsafe unless I've spent 2 days in sitting a course and 1 day having an exam. It just doesn't wash. But we haven't seen that so much in recent years, and that I found a lot better, because if we stood together as an industry and say drones are inherently safe, they've got a good safety record, and that can be defended, and then you can still say, but I think we should be insured because it's common sense, and if there's any damage done, it covers for that. And you can still say people that go into the commercial work can be trained. You can still say you need these levels of responsibility without being hysterical. And unfortunately, as you've mentioned, this holiday company, just for clickbait, have essentially just done a video doing that old thing again of saying, because what they were saying was basically they want drones to be banned unless you just happen to have got trained. So saying that every single person, I think even if you're going to fly 250, would have to go like with a car And again, this is the thing annoys me. They'll go, well, with a car, you've got to have a driver's license. You know, John. Then I go, yeah, C5 you didn't, you know. So it's not universally true. Then you thought, well, actually, it's a small electric car because of its size and so on. You don't. So you can say there's differences, and there are legitimate differences. But yeah, this guy went out there, made this, and the video wasn't even really good production standards either, really, if you're going to say, well, I'm super professional. But yeah, he went out there and he did that, and I just thought, why did you need to do it? I mean, it might be that it was just to get clickbait and to get us like we are doing now, talking about it. Who knows? So we might have sucked at it. But yeah, it was very positive, though, that it wasn't even the hobbyist community that jumped on it first this time. It was commercial operators, and they were all going, look, mate, leave it. You're talking nonsense. So there is the positive that there's far. I mean, because at the end of the day, every commercial operator started as a hobbyist. They know that, you know, a hobbyist isn't evil. A lot of those is responsible, and they'll come through themselves as commercial operators. So, yeah, there's good and bad that's come out of it, but it was good to see. It was good to see the reaction and people fighting back.
Yeah, we did stand together a bit, and Gorilla Drones has very kindly posted a link to it in the comments, and he says it's a load of tosh trying to use current issues to highlight or heighten their holiday business and sell holidays. And Chris says no level of professionalism or skill eradicates the possibility of genuine hardware equipment failure, though, which is, yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is true.
They've launched their Drone Haters holiday package, which is going very well, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was all.
I believe those guys from that holiday package will surely include a dog harassment tour with drones.
Yeah, well, it's, you know, we do have to, and you know, from the other side of the world, as it were, Tony has correctly put it, we do have to kind of stand together and start moving as one on these issues. But we've said this many times. Look,
since no one has spoken, we haven't said the magic words, blockchain and AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, no, nothing would be complete without. And there was actually, Chris I4C almost killed a dog on a mini quad once, chased me up and down steep hills in the park. Was chatting to the owner until it collapsed in a sweaty puddle. Was that you or the dog, Chris? Yes. So, yeah, it's obviously there can be issues, but it sounds this guy was flying over a field for a few seconds. It wasn't those issues, was it? Anyway, gentlemen, look, it's 1:15 already so soon. What a serious issue from Tony. I will edit the start of this video to get rid of a little bit of feedback.
I thought it was the best.
Yeah, probably was actually. Probably was. Yeah, it's some sort of rap thing. Just add in this thing from Services Parliament UK bills. I don't know what Phil's talking to us about there, but I won't click it now. So go on.
This is what I think it is. Will be a relevant piece of news. Oh, it's probably actually something else that I'm thinking of with a link to this. But yeah, the UK government's doing another select committee consultation on. I think part of it's a reaction to these new laws coming in and people jumping up and down, because the BMFA's already done a letter to Baroness Sugg, and they're saying, because as we've mentioned actually on this show straight away, we said, well, there's airfield, there's proper hobbyist BMFA fields that are caught up in the new extended ATCs, and obviously people now say, oh yeah, I've realised now, and so. There's problems already with people getting permission to fly the drones, and even commercial operators now. Some I think Southampton Airport saying 21 days notice, and then trying to put fees onto it. So I'm hoping it's going to look at some of those issues, and I don't know whether it's looking at wider issues, but basically it's a select committee on drones. So there is a consultation there that people need to. Just jump in there and put some positive views on drones. So it might be worth you covering that maybe next week and putting a link into it.
Phil says next phase of regulation in the UK suggests individual drones to be registered and not the pilot, because we all know that works. That's definitely.
Oh my God! Oh my God! That was going to be the law here. Fortunately, didn't go forward. It must be the pilots.
And Gorilla Drone says, as you sort of alluded to, Ian, can we have more PFCOs respond this time, please? Not just PFCOs, everybody, as many people as possible. Wasn't that first one? I can't remember the numbers as it went, Ian. The first one was something like 75 or 175. The next one was like 600, wasn't it? And the last one we just had, and
we've got just short of 5,000 PFCOs, and then you've got all your hobbyist community. So all of them have been woefully tiny, considering that, especially with PFCOs, it affects your job and your income. You really should be having your say.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. Does that make you wonder how many PFCOs are actually still operating then, doesn't it? For the number that have been out there. Okay, yes, we'll look at that. That's in the links, in the chat links for those of you dear viewers that are often here. And we'll look at that scheduled place on Friday, the 15th of March. I wonder if this will all get kicked down the road a little bit with other things that are happening. Do these things get delayed, or will they be read on time?
I think with the UK law stuff, because drones has been a political hot potato, I don't think Brexit will alter it, because the politicians have seen there's points to score. So unfortunately, we're in their fights.
Okay, we'll read that. Thanks very much indeed, Phil, for putting that up. And I am going to put the hammer down on this. Thanks very much, gentlemen. And let's just say, going once, going twice. Thank you very much indeed. Don't forget to join us 2100 next Tuesday, dear viewer. Thank you very much for watching. Have a lovely season.